forget that, like, in the sort of Enochian lore and in the mythology of Sumeria, all the things, all the arts and crafts and all the technologies of civilization, like farming and metallurgy and stuff, were all given to us by the spirits, right? So I feel like there is an intractable link between the human, like, will to create things and imagination and the spirit world. Like, every oyster mushroom is one organism that has branched off and extended itself through gulfs of time that we can barely comprehend. All we're eating are the fruits that it produces in return for us cultivating it. Like, lie down in bed and try to make it actually happen. But what I found was that more often I would have spontaneous experiences. Like, I would come home really tired from school or something and lie down on the couch, and then I would feel myself, like, roll off the couch and, like, slowly drift to the ground and, like, bounce off the floor. Or I would have experiences where I would sort of leave my body and not realize it and walk around my house at night and get outside in my backyard. And I would think, like, am I asleep or am I awake?
Hello, and welcome to the Spirit Box podcast, where we explore folklore, magic, the world of the spirits, and everything in between. For episode 73, we're joined by Wren Collier. Wren is a ritual magician and an avid scholar of the paranormal, having been obsessed from an early age with the anomalous and the occult. He's a skilled creator and maker, crafting beautiful magical tools. He's a keen gardener and mushroom cultivator, and has created an online calculator, which I'm sure you've all used, utilizing the new Aeon English Qabalah. So anybody who's been obsessed with Hellier and the impact that made in the occult group will have no doubt used this really cool tool that Wren developed. So in today's show, we talk creativity, we talk magic, we talk about finding animism in one's garden, and we talk about Wren's remarkable astral travel experiences and the importance of dreams. In the Plus show, we discuss dreaming further and get into cryptocurrency wizardry and technology in a broader sense, as Wren takes us through the creation of the new Aeon English Qabalah Cipher tool and his thoughts in Hellier. That's all in the Plus show, and if you'd like to hear the Plus show, you know the drill. Sign up to the Patreon and you'll get this Plus show and all of the archive material. Now, before we start, I'd like to give a big thank you to the ANC patron members: Icaro, William O, Robert W, Roland B, Steph, Tim, Tao, Wei, Pamela, Michelle, Merrily, Marco, Jen, Hannah, Flora, Eric, Desiree, Austin, Ali, Carrie S, Brennan, Tyler, Madeline, and Jorge. Thank you all so much for your support. It's hugely helpful. Now, if you'd like to support the show with Patreon isn't your thing, you can buy me coffee, via the link in the show notes, or drop me a positive review. Give me the old 5 stars. That would be awesome. Now, as you know, I'm always interested in people's experiences with the others. So if you have a story about the Jinn, the Shadow People, or the Fae, then reach out to me. I'd love to hear it. Let's get on with the show. Wren Collier, you're very welcome to the Spirit Box. It's lovely to have you.
Hello.
So you're very welcome, and we've been going back and forth on Twitter, arranging the interview. So I'm delighted to have you here, and just to kind of get the show moving. Could you introduce yourself and kind of broadly your areas of interest to the Spirit Box audience?
Sure. Awesome. And thank you for inviting me on. I'm a huge fan of the show, so it's an honor. So my areas of interest kind of jump all over the place, kind of depending on, like, whatever I'm most interested in any given moment. I kind of started out with paranormal stuff as a kid, being very interested in, like, UFOs, and, believed that I was like an alien abductee when I was a kid and stuff. And watched a lot of the X-Files and Unsolved Mysteries and stuff. But as I got older, I started getting into, like, when I was a teenager, I was friends with a kid in high school who bought a copy of the Simon Necronomicon. And, I remember reading that and just being like blown away that it's like, wait, is this real? Like, is he saying that you can really do magic, or is this just all like a fiction or whatever? And then later, I think I picked up a copy of Donald Michael Craig's Modern Magic in my local sort of big box retail bookstore, and started doing that. And that's a very like sort of Golden Dawn with some Thelemic stuff put into it, but it isn't, specifically Thelemic. And I sort of left it alone for a while. It wasn't until I got a little older and I started, I think I actually learned about sigil magic and stuff from like Grant Morrison's Pop Magic, and got interested in magic again, and specifically like chaos magic. And I read like Pete Carroll and I think I read Libernal and Psychonaut, and I got really pumped about magic again. But then I got drawn to like Goetia and spirit contact in particular, because at the same time I was sort of getting more into magic again. I also was having to make these like long drives at night, and I was looking for things to listen to, and I started listening to Coast AM again because it was like late at night, and I had it on my XM radio. And so eventually XM stopped broadcasting Coast to Coast. So I started looking at podcasts, and I found like Radio Misterioso and Where Did the Road Go and some other sort of paranormal podcasts. And my interest in like UFOs got sparked again. I was recommended to read, like I'd never really read any Jacques Vallée, so I read Passport to Magonia. And while reading it, there's a whole section where this guy, I think it's Fascist Cardin, talks about summoning the sylphs. And the sylphs that appear are effectively just like, sort of space brother contactee, entities, which is exactly, Vallée is making that connection there between, these entities that this guy's summoning in like Renaissance Europe, and then later on, meeting these blonde-haired, tall, blonde aliens out in the middle of the desert in America. And I had this like epiphany at the time, and I realized, oh, it's all the same thing. Like if I want to meet an alien, I need to do magic, because magic is conjuring the aliens. Like they're the same thing. This is all related. And so I started getting very much into sort of ceremonial ritual magic, and ended up getting led to the works of Rufus Opus and his like Seven Spheres book, and learned about the Trithenian method and stuff. And that's what led to me making all of those tools and stuff that I've posted pictures of on social media. And that has led to a lot of productive sort of spirit work since then. But yeah, typically, that's where I guess the core of my interest in practice lies right now, like specifically in angel magic, because I started a year ago or 2 years ago, actually, getting mentored by Scott Stenwick in Minneapolis at the Leaping Laughter OTO Lodge up here. So like I joined the OTO, took my Minerval in first degree and started training under Scott. And that whole thing has kind of been put on hold since the pandemic started, because we've stopped having in-person meetings. And unfortunately, that's kind of like sapped my magical practice a lot too, because it's like I realized I really started to enjoy practicing magic in a group. And once it was a solo practice again, it's like, I can't keep it up. It's like, I get less interested when I don't have someone else to work with. Kind of leads credence to the whole thing with them, scryers having, you have a magician and a scryer, right? You have two people in it. It's like, oh, there's actually a good reason for that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's an important distinction as well you made there, like that. There was this feeling, or there was this kind of sense when kind of the everything went online, en masse, when COVID first hit, that it's okay, we can do this digitally, and there's actually a lot of stuff that you can't really, and it's not a like for like at all, it's one of those things as well. Like as much as we were chatting about kind of just before we hit record about you and I both have created occult digital products and experiences, and they're cool, and they're interesting, fun projects to do and creative exercises. For example, with the sigil engine, lots of people say to me, it doesn't beat the material hands-on version of it, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely, you do you. It's not supposed to. But yeah, it's an important thing. Kind of realizing it's not a like for like substitute. As its pros and cons. There's a lot of cons. We're all pretty sick of it. But yeah, no, it's a good distinction. And in terms of, because you mentioned you wanted to kind of get into spirit contact, and kind of we're curious about the extraterrestrial phenomenon from great shows like Where Did the Road Go? Awesome show. And then Valet's work and Passport to Magonia. And you start to see these things start to interconnect, and you go, okay, well, hang on a second, these are very similar. And it is a proper kind of like holy shit moment when you get there, right? And like with your pursuits then in angel magic, I guess the fundamental question is, have you been able to make contact or have any of those holy shit moments in your practice?
It's tough. Like, I can't sit here and say that I've had like a full on like visionary experience. Like, I haven't been able to conjure something to physical manifestation. And like, that's what I've been working towards. And I do believe it's possible, but I can't personally say I've done that. Now, I have seen things in my crystal and scrying mirror and stuff while I'm doing this. So like, I remember at one point, it's all very vague. I mean, that's the hard part of talking about this, because I don't want to BS people, right? And give people because I think a lot of magicians talk up what they've experienced, right? And then it gives the wrong impression to people who are just getting into this. But, like staring into the scrying mirror, doing the ritual and stuff, like I did start to see what looked like a misty shape of like a bird in flight, like in profile. Wow. Didn't see anything else. There was nothing necessarily very profound about it, but it was something that I saw, that wasn't, as far as I know, it wasn't just my imagination. And I think other than that, I had a couple little small manifestations. Like I heard someone very distinctly say from like behind me and to my left, like speak, just sounded like someone was in the room with me and just said it. It wasn't like in my head or anything. It's possible it could have been somebody outside, like, saying it to someone else and I just overheard them. But it sounded like it was in the room with me. But not, after that, it's like nothing else really happened. Like kind of sat there for a minute and then started to speak, but didn't get any more answers and response.
It's really interesting. Like, and the point you made kind of about like magicians talking about I mean, like almost a bit of a pissing contest, about who's seen the most spirits, right, and who's conjured the most things. Like, but when you talk to, say, people who are visionaries by accident, most of them, they're not fucking happy about it. Like, it's kind of they seem as well. This has been hugely disruptive, or it's it's tormenting and really challenging, that kind of stuff, and not happy about it. But it also, a lot of the time, there's no, particularly in the West, right, there's no culture to surround people, or to like you're describing, training to practice magic, to have those experiences, to have those communications. People who are accidental visionaries often have no training. They're just trying to figure out what the hell's going on.
What I do feel too, though, I feel like a lot of emphasis gets placed on the visual aspect of things. In particular, like visual manifestation of a spirit that like Stephen Skinner talks about a lot. Like this, and Stephen Skinner doesn't necessarily say this, but I've heard this in other places, that it's like, if you don't get a visual manifestation, it didn't work, and I understand Stephen's argument that how do you know it worked if you don't get a physical manifestation? But I've certainly done rituals in which, and this is like another thing from my mentor. My mentor has basically, he says, I'm terrible at seeing things. Like, I don't have psychic vision. Like, I'm not a visionary, but I can feel things like on my skin. And so when he conjures, he like feels for it there. And like, he kind of knows when the spirit's there because he can like feel it, and that's a sense that you do get after a little while of doing this, is like all of a sudden you get the sense of like someone's standing in the room with you, like you can't see them. It's almost like, have you ever seen Wings of Desire?
No, with Nicolas Cage.
No, that was the remake of Wings of Desire. Oh. The original, it's a German movie, black and white.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's similar.
I'm sure my cultural creds here are a bit poor.
It's all about like angels, sort of, they're sort of psychopompic, like they take people when they fly, and it's following these angels as they kind of go about their daily duties.
Okay.
And at one point, the actor Peter Falk plays a Columbo. He is like in the movie as himself, as Peter Falk. He's like in Berlin to like shoot a movie or something. And he actually ends up having a conversation with this one angel who's like watching him, like get coffee. And he, he says to the angel, like, I can't see you, but I know you're there, And he's like, and that's how I feel about spirit contact. A lot of times, like, you can't see them. Maybe some people can, maybe I'm just not a very good magician, but I can feel them sometimes. Like, I've had the sensation while doing ritual that like someone was walking around behind my back, like you could feel them like brush up against me. Yeah. That thing,
Yeah, no, I absolutely do know exactly what you mean. Like it's similar for me. I don't see a huge amount of stuff. I've seen things, again, but not for like, they're not things that I've, purposely gone out to try and contact, right? It's been a couple of those, like, sweet Christ, what is that moment? But subsequently, I do know exactly what you're saying. It's that sense of presence, and there's a subtle shift in the energy in the room, in the magical space. That like a heaviness.
Like I've seen air currents in the room shift without any external factor, like no fans or anything on. I remember that was one like key signal to me that something was happening, because the incense smoke started blowing, and I was like, there's no air blowing from anywhere. So how is this happening?
Yeah.
And so I think like people, if they're doing like this type of magic, like don't be frustrated if you're not seeing things in the mirror or in the crystal or whatever. Like sometimes the spirit's there. You just need to feel for it in other ways, maybe smells or sounds, or, there's a lot of ways it can manifest. And, I think everybody's got different aptitudes for various things. So you kind of just have to feel for it. But once you do it enough, you do get the sense of how to feel for it.
Right. What was I going to say? What I was going to say is in terms of like looking into the paranormal, and, working with spirits through magic, that the spirit world starts to pay attention to you a little bit more, and with that, there are a number of and this is a very loose theory that I have, but with that is a number of side effects in terms of what we as individuals start to do, and how we kind of start to express ourselves in a different way. And like art is a massive one. I often find that kind of people with kind of that pilot light of creative energy, are often in this space, right? They're often kind of exploring the world of spirit in whatever capacity it might be, and it begs questions around kind of what creativity is, what actually is happening. Is it kind of received impetus, and are you being kind of more of a vessel for art and for creative expression? So there's a couple of things there. So there's creativity, and that manifests in different ways. And kind of one of the ways that kind of I've observed on kind of your social is just all the kind of really cool things that you create, both kind of like technical and physical things, so kind of, and executed really well. Like again, your altar is just fucking cool. Like, I mean, from even if I had no idea what was on the altar, just from an aesthetic point of view, I appreciate kind of the quality of execution is awesome. And then equally in developing the NAEQ, and then also now you're kind of working. Getting close to kind of your nature and your own food production, and kind of some of the projects you've got on the go there, and it was one of those things that kind of I was looking at kind of your work, and I do so many similar things, and a lot of it is very much, for me personally, is intertwined with kind of my magical practice. It's like, my garden, I've always loved gardening, and I realized, well, that's probably just because I have that energy of like, I vibe off, growing stuff. That kind of gives me an awful lot. Like, gives me, it's very meditative for me. It's very relaxing and healing and all that kind of stuff. It stops the chatter in my head if I'm out in my garden doing that work. But now it's kind of evolved into, it's taking me into the kitchen where I'm, playing with preserving my food or producing food in different ways. And also kind of, like making my own tinctures and medicine and all that kind of stuff. And it's changed how I think, but all of that's intertwined with kind of my belief of kind of like the kind of sentience in plants, and kind of wrapped up in animism. That's a very, very long-winded question. But ultimately, I was going to ask you about your creativity and kind of how it expresses itself and what you think is going on there, and is it intertwined with your magic practice?
Yeah, I definitely feel like it is. Don't forget that, like, in the sort of Enochian lore and in the mythology of Sumeria, all the things, all the arts and crafts and all the technologies of civilization like farming and metallurgy and stuff were all given to us by the spirits, right? Yeah. So I feel like there is an intractable link between the human like will to create things and imagination and the spirit world. So for me, it's also like, not to get too Alan Moore about it, but it is like a magical act, like gardening, right? Growing something, right? Because it is manifesting a will. It is taking something from nothing and turning it into food, right? Something that can sustain life. It's like a very, I don't know. I've always been into like gardening, but it wasn't until I think this year that I really had the space to do it, because we like bought a house last September, and it was like I finally had a large enough space that I could really try to grow a lot of things. Yeah. And it's been challenging because I'm like first year really doing it. I'm not very good at it. So I've had lots of little mishaps and figuring things out as I go. And, I was doing the same thing with mycology as well, because I have a whole tent set up where I built a humidifier and a flow hood, and I've started, growing mushrooms and stuff in that. And that's been really rewarding. Cool. The mushrooms were especially, I think, rewarding to grow. Like, I totally agree with you about the sentience of plants. And I think that definitely extends to fungus as well. Yeah. Because that's one thing I like. I don't know. This is very, very strange, I guess. And I'm not necessarily talking about psychedelic mushrooms, but even just like gourmet mushrooms that you would just eat. I got the sense when I was making them that I had built this relationship between the mycelium that made up the main body and its fruits that it was producing. And I remember my partner was kind of upset about eating the mushrooms because she was like, I feel kind of bad like eating them. And I was like, but you're not eating the mushroom. There's only, I don't know. It's something that I completely off the cuff said this, but it was like, I was like, there's only one mushroom. Like every oyster mushroom is one. It's one organism that has branched off and extended itself through gulfs of time that we can barely comprehend. All we're eating are the fruits that it produces in return for us cultivating it. Yeah. Like this is our reward for cultivating and its life. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's been really rewarding. And I'm getting into making medicine, like you mentioned, tinctures and stuff. Like I've got some reishi growing now and some lion's mane that I really want to try. Cool. So that's going to be another sort of fun experiment. Mm-hmm. And I mean, in general, I've said this before on socials and stuff about how it's kind of funny when you look at like lists of offices of spirits and like the Goetia and stuff, and it talks about them teaching you about precious minerals and crystals and herbs and all these different sort of arts and crafts things. And I'm like, you have to learn all that stuff to conjure them in the first place. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like a retrocausal kind of thing, right? Like you need to learn leatherworking and metallurgy and all of these other things to build the tools necessary to get taught those things. Like I remember when I was learning, when I was making those Trithenian tables and like the altar setup and stuff I did, I had to learn like how to do acid etching, which is something I never, I spent a lot of time on YouTube, basically, like looking up every example I could find of like how to do this thing. And then I would screw it up, 5 or 6 times before I could finally correctly accomplish it. And I think there's something to be said about working with beautiful tools. Like I'm lucky in that, like I have income and stuff that allows me to purchase materials and tools and things that allow me to make stuff like this. And the thing I would like always want to avoid is other people looking at like my setup and being like, I need to also have that in order to do magic. Like you don't. I promise you can do magic with much simpler setup than I have. For me, it's just, I have a really obsessive personality. And once I start working on something, I tend to sort of take it to an extreme that a lot of people don't. And I also am an autodidact, so I spend a lot of time just like learning how to do all of these different things. And it's rewarding in the end, but it's not necessary either. So I want that to be clear to people. Like you can do magic with a much simpler setup than what I have. I just prefer to have it because I feel like it enhances my experience of doing magic. Because and I mean this in the nicest possible way, but magic is LARPing to some extent, right? Like when you're doing a ritual and you're dressed up in funny outfit and you've got a wand and everything, it is a bit like playing live action Dungeons and Dragons. It's like magic is like the theater kids' playground. But that's also like how you get good magic. That's also how you get good ritual is like a sense of dramatics, like a sense of theatrics. And like some of the best rituals I've been part of had that sense that you were in a play. You were in some sort of production, and you were all doing your different roles and everything. Like if people had never, and that's like I mentioned before, that's one thing I really got out of working with a group was that ability to have these almost theatrical productions put on.
Right.
That it's just so hard to do when you're just by yourself.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Excuse me. I like your point that it's not necessary, but it can help get individuals there. It can kind of like help kind of build the potency for things. I've had that in a similar place where like things from like my altar, some of them are like from different places where I've been around the world, and how I visualize that as like it's like accumulating like holiness or power that kind of resonates from my altar. It's that complete nonsense, but it works for me, and I think that's the key point. Looking at I love how you describe your growing of mushrooms and kind of those epiphanies and kind of how you sort of see way beyond the fruit when you build a relationship with plants of Mycelia that you start to work with, and it certainly kind of with my gardening process, where as I said to you already, it's kind of it's hugely meditative for me, and kind of like just brings me back from sitting in front of screens all the time. It's a wonderful escape from all that, and very special. But how it's changed how I think is massive, and it's only really kind of dawned on me of late that kind of I'm 5 seasons in my garden now, like, and I start to think about like, well, where the sun is, seasons a lot more. I start to think about the impact of like microclimates and what plants thrive where and why, and you start to think about the nutrients that they take out of the soil. And ultimately, that's got me to a very animistic place, like which is an interesting kind of corkscrew thought. If you look at it in a lot of ways, like, well, how the fuck did you get there? Like, if you're talking about like the nitrogen content of your soil to somehow thinking about the spirit of it, but that does happen.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I mean, I feel like And that's something that until you mentioned that, like I didn't realize that I'd noticed that as well. Like having to actually pay attention to what's going on outside and like the world around you. Like, I think I made a lot of rookie mistakes this year because when I first started out gardening, I wasn't paying attention to a lot of those things.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought it'd be a good idea to plant 6 squash plants. And now I have more squash than I ever want to eat in my life. I'm sick of squash. But it was like learning sort of the natures of those plants, like how much they produce and what kind of weather they like. And also understanding too, like the nature of like their life cycles. Because like I having not really grown a whole lot before, I didn't understand how, if we have spikes in temperature, it might cause my lettuces to bolt and start producing flowers and go bitter. Yeah. And so like getting intimate with like their own life cycles has been immensely rewarding. And yeah, like it's almost, I don't understand how you could do it and not be animist, because I think like some people even get this intuitively without even thinking about it. Like we're thinking about it. Like my mom told me several months ago, we were talking about gardening, and she had told me that they had a bunch of tomato plants at her house. And they originally just had a couple, and they had, over the seasons, they have multiplied a ton. And so they have like 30 tomato plants or something now. And she told me that they play them country music because she's like down south in Alabama. And I'm like, why do you play them country music? And she's like, I don't know. They like the music. Yeah. And she doesn't think like me at all. Yeah. She is not like into the paranormal stuff at all, but she just intuitively knows, hey, these plants like this kind of music, and I'm going to play them this music because they enjoy it and they grow better fruit when they listen to it. Yeah, I love that stuff. I think that's amazing that people get on that. Yeah, they find themselves there, and what was I going to say? And from that point to kind of like when you start. What am I trying to say is that one of the things that's really started to, I don't know, I've just developed this practice this year. I don't know. I think I've just read so much about fairies that I've started doing this that it's slowly seeped into my brain. But I spend a lot of time in my garden at night. I kind of go out to kind of, initially it was like part of just kind of going out to essentially put my plants to bed and patrol them and make sure there's no pest hammering them. But now I kind of like, I do that, but I also spend time in like a silent garden listening to the night, and listening to the movement of the wind, the plants and all that kind of stuff. And since I started doing that, I get a lot more of a sense of spirit in the place, and as you were talking about earlier on, that sense of something behind you, that's certainly a lot more kind of prevalent of like there's something there, and like that, and I like to think that that's the spirit of place, that's appreciative of the fact that you're undertaking a form of stewardship on the land, and I think there is an exchange there, that could be very naive, but it's kind of how I feel about it. No, I feel the same way. Like, I need to actually try that. I don't think I've really sat outside with my plants at night, but I should try that sometime. It's funny because I do talk about them a lot as if they were persons. Like, I posted some pictures of like the hydroponic like towers that I built. Yeah, that's really cool. But there's some lettuces and stuff that are growing in those now, and it got really chilly last night, and they had all sort of curled up and gotten tighter, I guess, to preserve warmth. Yeah. And I was just like, I don't know, we were talking about them. It's like, oh, they must have been chilly last night. They were all trying to get warm. And it's like you talk about them as if, they are living things, obviously, but you talk about them with like personhood rather than, and then I don't know, then it ends up making me kind of guilty to eat them. I remember even plants earlier this year, like when the like arugula bolted and it was, no longer useful, I kind of was like hesitant to pull it up and like resow plants, I felt bad about it. Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. There are certain jobs that kind of like I like pruning plants that's necessary to say force them to grow. I mean, it doesn't sound like you've got that problem with your squashes. It sounds like you're stacked with them. Pruning is a skill that I'm slowly picking up on. Yeah.
and just to kind of force the energy into the fruit and stop the kind of the tendrils growing is a good technique. But it's like I always apologize to the plant kind of when I do it. You know, it's definitely a shift in how to think. You know. But interestingly enough, again, like talking about from there into the kitchen, this is going to be the most fucking like garden focused Spirit Box show for listen everybody listening. You just stop bitching and go and buy some fucking plants and go and sit in your garden at night and you'll see what we're talking about. But the one of the and I saw this on your social as well. You were making kimchi out of some of your products, you know. And like I've been doing the same with chili, and kind of that's again the same thing. It's like, you know, you start making your own vinegar, you start making kind of your own like lacto ferments, and you're understanding a lot more about the chemical processes that go into things. And it's exactly what you're describing. It's like all those kind of different tool sets and kind of experimentation that you do, you're building this kind of jigsaw of capability that ultimately you get into kind of that frame kind of alchemical, you know, entry level of alchemical stuff, but equally into kind of into magical practice. But the spirit of play stuff is huge, I think, you know, and one of the things I've been looking at a lot now as well is that whole thing of like cunning woman healers and kind of receiving the knowledge for medicinal plants from their kind of their fairy ally, you know.
Yeah. That's something I wish I had more, I guess, knowledge of. Like, I think I've mentioned this before, but I found out that my like great grandmother, maybe it was great grandmother, on my dad's side was a cunning woman.
Oh, wow.
It just got mentioned in passing to me. Like last time I went home, since I live in Minnesota, so I'm very far away from sort of my ancestral lands. And I wanted to make sure that when I went down to visit, I don't get to visit very often. And I wanted to go to all the graves of ancestors that I knew about and just like leave them some flowers, clean up the grave and collect some grave dirt so I could build sort of a family altar up here and make them offerings like where I am now. And the grave of that lady, she was just Collier Granny was what my dad knew. When I was talking to him about her, he just offhand said, one time Collier Granny rubbed warts off my hands when I was a little kid. And I was like, wait, what? What did she do? And he was like, yeah, she could rub warts off people's hands. What? And like, I instantly knew, I was like, that's an Appalachian folk magic thing. Like that's a powwow thing. And I ended up learning that, like, yeah, my grandmother on my mom's side knew a guy who could stop blood. You know, he would like, one time she had a really bad nosebleed and they tried to get her to go to the hospital. She was like, no, just call this guy. And they called him and he read like the Bible verse over the phone and her nose stopped bleeding. Wow. And so like learning that there was like some sort of familial connection to that, really, it was really interesting to me. And it got me really into Appalachian folk magic and like cunning man, cunning folk kind of magic. And it's like, even though I don't personally consider myself like a Christian, I have no problem using psalms and like blood stopping charms and all this kind of stuff. Cause I'm like, and that's the other interesting thing too, that I've learned from working with angels and not necessarily being Christian, is that they're like willing to listen, even if you're not of the faith, you know. I think they just like humans. Right. They don't really necessarily, maybe they would like me to be a Christian. I don't know. I never really asked them. But yeah, I love cunning folk stuff. Like the fairy question is a little different here, because it's like, I'm fairly certain that the Americas have their own versions of fairies, right? Like you have like the Albatwitches in the Pennsylvanias. I mean, Bigfoot is more than likely some sort of like faithful kind of creature. And in the South, in the Appalachians, in Georgia in particular, the Cherokee people there had, I can't remember it's like the Nunawee, I think is the name. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, but it's like, when you read the description on Wikipedia, it says the Cherokee believed that these were like a small race of magical folk who lived underground. And I was like, literally fairies. I mean, it doesn't really get more the same than that. And they have all these legends about, them being sort of tricksters and stealing people and kidnapping them, taking them to the fairylands and everything. Very, very similar, but it's like, I can't say that, I don't know. I need to look more into the sort of cultural lore of the area I live in now and see if I can find something similar, because I would love to explore that more.
Yeah, definitely. The mythology and folklore, it just seems to be everywhere. Mm-hmm. When I first started looking at the kind of the fairy lore after kind of studying a lot of the djinn stuff, it just blew me away. I mean, it's blindingly obvious, right? It's one of those things that you just ignore the local stuff until someone else tells you about it, and then kind of get into your local tradition. You find this whole, just vast body of folklore. It's amazing. So with your the kind of the cunning woman in your ancestry, has that given you kind of an impetus to kind of pursue that area? And is there a tension between that and kind of your kind of more ritual magic practice?
It has, and I feel like I've been able to not syncretize isn't the right word, but sort of combine the practices, because I feel like a lot of the powwow and cunning folk stuff, I tend to think of people like Joseph Smith, who was very much a ceremonial magician. I think he had a copy of the Magus, and actually modeled my black-handled knife after Joseph Smith's black-handled knife, because I like the way he designed it. So not many, I guess, people in Mormonism realize how much of a magician he was, but he was also steeped in that sort of powwow tradition as well. And I feel like they're not necessarily at odds with each other. It's all just, natural philosophy, I guess,
right. Yeah.
As a group would say. It's not necessarily, I don't even think people would have considered it magic, because when cunning folk and powwow people do stuff like blood stopping charms or talking the fire out of burns and things like that, they don't necessarily think of that as magic anyway. I mean, they're doing magic, but they wouldn't think of it as that. They would think of it as, something granted to them by the grace of God or something.
Right.
And it has opened me up to sort of a primary focus in my own magic. I found that I really like doing magic to try to heal people or help people with illnesses or surgeries or things like that. And it's something that I don't do super often. And I also don't make any promises about it. I get permission from someone and I say, I'll see what I can do to help. I can't promise this is going to do anything. Mm-hmm. So far, it's worked out really well. My little brother was struggling with some addiction issues. So I, without him knowing this, actually, I didn't ask him for permission because he's my little brother, but
that's brother relationships. That's fine.
Exactly.
That's within the rules.
Yeah. So I did a conjuration of Raphael using the operant field method that my mentor uses and taught me, and basically just asked him to, give my little brother the strength to, kick whatever he was on and to sort of help him and guide him through it. Probably just a very complicated version of something like a Catholic grandmother would do with an icon of Saint Raphael or something. Yeah. But the next day, he called me and told me that he was going to try going cold turkey and managed to get off what he was on and he's been clean since. So
awesome.
I feel like it works fantastically. And, during that ritual, that's the thing I kind of missed earlier. Other than just a sense of presence, I didn't necessarily see Raphael visibly manifest to me or anything. It's just, I felt like he was there and I made my petition and I let it go, and it had results. So I think ultimately, results are what matters, not necessarily what happens during the ritual.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Having a confirmation that it worked is great, but what really matters is like what happens in the end. Did your magic work or not?
Yeah. I got dicey internet. It's been really shit this week, so my apologies if I look like I'm frozen. That cool. So in terms of like your initial explorations into this area, so you came in from that kind of paranormal route that brought you into kind of magic, and you've kind of developed from there. What kind of place does the paranormal play in your life? You know, if we kind of park the magic stuff in terms of the weirdness and the high strangeness, is that still a pull for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I honestly feel like that's still my focus. Like especially things like out of body experiences. I did a show with Douglas Batchelor about out of body experiences and journeying and stuff. And like, honestly, more than magic or anything else, that's been the primary sort of thing I guess struggled with. It's not the right word, but sort of like I've had spontaneous out of body experiences since I was like a teen, like early teen. So
how did you pass that up? I mean, let's go there.
Yeah, it's I got really interested in it because it started out as just sleep paralysis as a kid, right? And that's why I mentioned earlier I thought that I was an abductee, because I would have these experiences where I'd wake up in the middle of the night, be unable to move, and there would be like things in my room, like little short beings who I would see walk into the bedroom and stuff like that. And so because of the UFO and sort of culture I was like steeped in at the moment, I was like, oh, obviously I'm being abducted by aliens.
Right.
It didn't help that one time I had somebody sleep over, and the next morning they told me they woke up in the middle of the night and I was sitting on the edge of my bed with a gray alien next to me, and I told him it was okay to go back to sleep. And so, obviously I don't know if he was lying to me, because he also told me a lot of other things that I'm not necessarily sure are true, but it didn't help me when I was a kid. Right? And like Red Communion and just, I had to like divest myself of a lot of that stuff because I got so paranoid that I was like freaking out my parents.
Right. And
just had to be like, no more UFO stuff for a while. So, but later what I learned when I was having these sort of sleep paralysis experiences was that like sometimes I would feel like I would move outside of like where I physically was. I started reading, I think I picked up a copy of Robert Bruce's Astral Dynamics, which I still think is a really good book, even if I don't necessarily agree with some of it now, like his sort of theories and terminology and stuff. But it is still a pretty good user manual for trying to do this stuff. And I was able to like consciously do it, like just like a handful of times,
right?
Where I actually like lie down in bed and try to make it actually happen. But what I found was that more often I would have spontaneous experiences. Like I would come home really tired from school or something and lie down on the couch, and then I would feel myself like roll off the couch and like slowly drift to the ground and like bounce off the floor. Or I would have experiences where I would sort of leave my body and not realize it and walk around my house at night and get outside in my backyard. And I would think like, am I asleep or am I awake? And then I would try to jump, and then I would jump like 100 feet up into the air and freak myself out and then snap back to my body. And so like it got me really interested in that type of experience. And I feel like those experiences have been far more dramatic from a sort of magical perspective than any sort of ritual magic.
Sure.
Done. Like encountering like entities and spirits and stuff sort of out there can be very dramatic. And there's always the question, am I just dreaming, right? Is this just lucid dreaming? I have no idea. I think lucid dreaming might, and astral travel, or like whatever you want to call it, might actually just be the same thing.
Right.
But I delineate them in the sense that when I have an out-of-body experience, there's no sensation of going to sleep, right? Like I consider something a lucid dream if I wake up inside the dream. Right. I consider it an out-of-body experience if there's no break in consciousness that I'm aware of. Like if I go from lying in bed to getting out of my body, like even if once I start to move away from like my local environment, like once I leave like my house and my immediate area, things tend to get very strange, right? I'll end up in places I've never seen before in my life, or places that are obviously not real, and they're not in the real world. And things become very dreamlike. Like I'll see like a giant boar like walking down the street of my neighborhood or something, things like that. Yeah.
So you mentioned just at the end there the giant boar, but and just before you got into that, you mentioned these kind of dramatic encounters. Could you talk to some of those?
Yeah, sure. I think one encounter, I've talked about this one before, so if anybody's listening has heard me talk about this before, I'm sorry, but
they listen to me repeat myself endlessly, so it'll be fine.
I had a very dramatic, like witch riding my back kind of experience where I was going to sleep one night and I was like laying on my side. And as I was drifting off to sleep, I started hearing like this wind rushing through my room. And I felt somebody crawl into bed with me and like kind of come up behind me and spoon with me. And I was like paralyzed and I wanted to get up really badly. And as I was like trying to struggle to get up, I heard a voice say in my ear, like, stay, like, don't just stay here with me, go to sleep. And I like using the phrase, like jumping out of your skin. Like I literally jumped out of my body and didn't realize I was out of body at first. But like I jumped up and then I felt something jump onto my back and start riding me around the room. Like I couldn't pull it off of me. And I remember thinking, like panicking in myself, thinking like, what do people do in this situation? Like maybe I should call in the name of Christ. And so like I tried to do like like in the name of Christ, I tell you to get off my back. And that didn't do anything. And I was like, okay, what do I do? What do I do? And I just got this flash of inspiration that I needed to use like my name, like my will. So I was like, in my name, like I tell you to get off of me. And so at that point I was able to like peel off whatever it was and like threw it onto the bed. And it was just like this tiny little, like black octopus, just very squirmy, wriggly little thing, kind of like pathetic looking. And I got really, really, really angry because I was just like, how dare this thing come into my house at night and try to like feed on me or whatever it was trying to do to me. And like, I started getting angrier and angrier and felt like I was like turning into some sort of like creature, like, very like Michael Jackson Thriller, like seeing my hands like turn into claws and feeling myself like grow huge. And I just went over to this thing and just like grabbed it and just like ate it, just like shoved it down my throat. And I remember that it felt like gritty, like like those toys that are like spandex that have like sand inside of them. That's how it felt. It was like sand inside of like slime. And and then I just like, I think since I was out of body, I was like, oh, well, that was fun. Let's go explore. So I just like went around the neighborhood or something. And for a long time, I was having a lot of experiences that weren't necessarily as dramatic as that, like where something wasn't like attacking me, but I was getting into fights a lot. Right. I would go out of body. I would encounter what I'm just going to describe as like entities, right? Like, and I would, they would always be sort of like adversarial and like predatory in nature. Like, remember one where I was like fighting off like velociraptors or something that were like inside of a museum at night. And one where like the giant boar, like it acted like it was going to like charge me. And so I just like screamed at it and it got scared and ran off. And just like a lot of those sort of encounters where I'm always like winning these fights, right? I'm always sort of like asserting my dominance over these entities that are trying to attack me. But then I had an experience where I went out of body and I wandered around. I ended up in this place where there was this lady who it was like just a small little room. It was almost like a room that was like too small. I made the comparison at the time when I was a kid in school. We used to have these. The local fire department had this tiny replica house that they would take kids into, and they would like have like fake smoke and stuff, so they could like show you like how to like check the door and like get out of your house in case there was a fire. But it was like this little tiny miniature house. So everything inside of it was very small, and that's what it reminded me of. And she didn't say anything to me. But I got the sense that I was like trapped, or I'd had this experience previously where I felt like something had trapped me somewhere and I'd gotten really angry and it forced it to release me. But in this case, I was like, I don't want to be here. I tried to go down this hallway that was next to her. And the harder I struggled and tried to get down this hallway, the more the hallway would constrict onto me and like keep me from moving. Like the harder I tried, the tighter it gripped me. And what I finally had to do to get out of that situation, like I tried to threaten the woman and like nothing I could do could hurt her. I finally just had to like calm down and accept that like I couldn't like, I guess, defeat her, and I had to kiss her in order to like exit. And I had to like, I guess, like show love or compassion. And when I woke up from that experience, I like got the impression that was like something trying to tell me, you really need to chill out here. You don't have to fight everything. Not everything out here is like trying to hurt you. Mm-hmm. And you're causing a lot of trouble. And it almost, it like reminded me too of like Sun Wukong and the Buddha, right? Where he tries to sort of escape the Buddhist grasp and travels, millions of light years, and then finds out that he's just at like the Buddha's palm or something. And that was a really, that experience sort of changed the flavor of out of body experiences that I've had since then, where there've been a lot less adversarial in nature, right, and more just sort of enjoyable, being able to explore places.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the astral traveling and journeying like that, has that influenced, say, some of your other endeavors, like the stuff we've discussed earlier? Like, do you kind of stumble upon like a mushroom or plant consciousness or kind of concepts that you develop?
I can't say that I've encountered anything that I knew was like a plant or mushroom consciousness. I have had experiences in that state that I really could only describe as like, I don't know. I think the term HGA is extremely corny, but like I did do a divination at one point. Like I got a name. I've been trying to make contact, and I've had some dreams in which I met a man who looks just like I imagined him to look, who would show me books. And I remember it reminded me a lot of the stuff that Dr. Al was talking about with right. Excellent book of The Art of Magic, like being given books by spirits. And the bad thing is, though, I just don't remember what any of the books said. Like I've had multiple experiences where I remember one, I was like in a book. This was more like a dream. It wasn't so much an out of body experience, but a dream in which I was in a bookstore and this, man in this white suit, who looks like, the entity like I'd seen in a mirror at one point, like walked up to me and said, "Oh, hey, you should look at these books. These are really cool." And I was looking at this book, and inside the book, it had like a register of spirits that I'd never seen before. And I was like, oh my God, like this is like a grimoire that I've never heard of before. But the problem is like, it wasn't a lucid dream. So I didn't think this is important. I should remember this, or like try to remember some of these spirit names, or like write down some of this stuff. And I almost felt like really disappointed after that, because I was like, felt like somebody was like trying to give me something there. And I had a similar experience when I was younger, where I had a dream where I met this entity. It was like black robed sort of spirit, and I recognized it as a spirit and asked it to tell me its like sign and seal and what its offices were. And it like drew like in the stars, like sort of like a constellation that I could see like what its sigil looked like and everything. And but of course, when I wake up, I don't remember anything more about it or like what its name was or anything. So it's super frustrating. It's why I encourage people to like try to work on dream recall, because you'll get taught a lot of really important things in dreams, and dream recall isn't it's a skill that has to be like honed. And I'm like not going to BS and say I'm very good at it. I'm terrible at dream recall, but I'm like trying to get better at it. Because I realize that sometimes when you dream, you really are given things and have contacts. And I mean, that meeting spirits on the dream world, like lately, is even like what I've been encouraging people to do who are interested in like spirit contact and like ritual magic and stuff. Because even in Greek necromancy, conjuring a human shade to physical appearance was always sort of seen as like an unnecessarily complex or onerous thing to do. It was much more simple to make an offering to them on their grave and take a nap, right? And meet them in a dream. And there wasn't necessarily any delineation in ancient people's minds that like dreams weren't real. Like your dreams are just as real as your waking life. Just because something happened in a dream doesn't mean you shouldn't pay attention to it. You know, if you meet a god in your dream, well, then you met that god. There's no, it was just a dream.
Ren, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Douglas mentioned to me, he said you two will be a good chat, knowing that we were going to catch up. So I think he was right. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. It's I could easily probably do another hour, but I won't voice that on you. You've got stuff to do. Get on with your day. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we can get you back on the Spirit Box sometime. That'd be great.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you for inviting me on. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Ren. That was a really interesting conversation. Great to speak to you. Do check out Ren's digital presence in the show notes. He does a lot of really cool things and is one of the more interesting people on Twitter. So do check that out. Right, that's it from me. Thank you for listening. Take care and talk soon.